where these roads are on that, if you like. I may have a reduced copy in my file. Right now, we currently hold just over or close to $2 million in bond. The bond covers the public improvements, and the bond for the orchards is divided up into a surety bond. So one is being held.
And just to clarify, the town holds that bond because we're the owner of all of that land.
Well, we're responsible to an extent. So when we approve a subdivision and when there's public improvements, I, as a potential homeowner or lot owner, have a reasonable expectation to have those public improvements completed. So what we, the town, do is if we're going to take over the public improvements and we're going to become our maintenance headache, what we do is we require a bond to ensure that that work gets done. If the developer defaults and cannot complete it, we at least have the money to go in, build the road, and then the person who bought the lot at the end of the cul-de-sac can be assured that they have a road. And then we can be assured that that road meets the town requirements for a road. So with this bond, we've broken it up into a couple of different pieces. One is for erosion and sedimentation control. The other is for the public improvements. There may be one for landscaping, kind of wrapped up into that E&S. And then we also had a separate bond for soils remediation. So as you know, the orchards wouldn't be named the orchards if it didn't wipe out an orchard. So the orchards obviously was used as an apple orchard. Pesticides and herbicides were consistently used. So they've had to go in the area of Peach Lane, and then there's a road, they got the binder course done. It's called Partridge. All of this area was the primary location of the orchard. It's now lots. All of the soils that were contaminated have been removed from these lots and stockpiled in an area adjacent to Arbor Crossing and Scott Road. So it's kind of sits in between, and they've graded all of that out. Mr. Benny here is asking for an as-built plan that's going to show that grading and that all that work has been completed. Obviously, the soil is contaminated with pesticides and herbicides, and it gets capped with 4 inches of topsoil. So that work has been completed. We do need Ledge Light to give us a final okay, if you will. The developer actually has to submit some additional paperwork just to verify that that's all been done. Although Mr. Benny did indicate that Arbor Crossing and Holly Lane appear to be substantially complete. So he's working on this, and I think by our next meeting, he will have completely reviewed the as-built plans and have an answer for this commission as to whether or not you should recommend road acceptance to the Board of Selectmen. So
this commission has time to next meeting to make this decision?
Right. Well, we do respect and understand that the applicant, or in this case the developer, requested their bond release, and it's a substantial bond release. And we're talking over $500,000. Well, we understand that that's a lot of money to have tied up in a bond. At the same time, we're just asking to work with the applicant and the developer, and thus far we've had a pretty good working relationship. So I don't think that this will upset the apple cart.
That is deferring until our next meeting.
Yeah.
Very well. Yeah, I'm not.
But I frankly don't think we have a choice, just because without.
It'd be prudent to wait for a final sign off on that soil. Okay. Also, maybe for our next meeting, we could show everyone a map of the orchards, because it is this kind of unusual giant circle configuration, and just setting expectations about how these roads were going to be built out is an important aspect of our obligation as the planning commission.
Did we not get that a while ago?
The
roads
request?
I mean, the thing on orchards?
It's been getting built for as long as I've been here.
So what this commission has done with the orchards is we recognize that the time limit for completion has expired, but the commission has not terminated the subdivision like we did with Darrow's Ridge. So what we've indicated to the carriers is that obviously failure to complete anything or to make good progress, it's kind of subjective, but to make continue progress, that the town would be on the hook to call the bond. The problem we have as a town is that's a substantial project to complete.
Mm-hmm.
and for the town to manage that, which we could do, would just be very extremely difficult. Especially with budget issues and and not having a field engineer. So it might be something. I don't know that there's enough money in the bond to subcontract it and farm out that work. I just don't think it's there.
Well, we
I
still
think
want to
moving-
apply our regulations, even if
We still want to apply the
there's a
regulations.
financial
So-
dimension to them.
So basically, the carriers are building out the subdivision at their own risk. That if should someone decide to purchase a lot in there that has been released for sale, and there's no road to it, we could at any minute call the bond and pave the road.
Where will they? Have they put on record where they will be when the paving season this year ends?
They'll be, I think, done with. I don't even think they're going to finish Partridge. I think they just get finished what they did, Holly Lane, up to Peach,
Okay.
and I think that's it for this year.
And
They'll finish.
what is the balance of work that would be left to be done?
So you've got basically from Partridge Court, which is it's a little horseshoe off of Arbor on the north side of the subdivision. I'd say about 10 or 12 lots on that road.
For our next meeting, we can show it on a map, because I just want to kind of get a sense of how far down the yardstick we are and how many roads
they-
have yet to be built.
So the portion of road that's yet to be built, it's been boxed out, it's cut out, is from basically the intersection of Partridge and Arbor all the way back around to Plum Hill. That it's been boxed out, the infrastructure's in terms of the sewer and storm drainage.
Mhm.
So that's all been kind of put into place. They still have to cut in a detention basin and pave out the road, but they haven't started that work.
So if someone purchased a house right at the beginning of that subdivision, they've been seeing work trucks building the roads associated with the subdivision for how many years consecutively now?
It's hard to say. That depends on where you're at. If
Well,
I'm on
I
Plum
mean,
Hill,
like-
I don't see a single truck. I might see delivery trucks.
If you're at the threshold.
If I'm at the threshold, if I'm on Peach Lane, let's say,
Yeah.
that was being built over the last 2 years.
And
So they've experienced constant traffic.
the subdivision was created in what year? Because I believe the carriers took it over around 2010, 2009.
They had. I want to say it was approved in the late 90s, early 2000s. Because I believe they ran it out to 14 years, the extension. They maxed it. And now the. Pardon?
I remember there was I think you're right.
Yeah, so it was late 90s, early 2000s.
So maybe for our next meeting, when we're going to look at this, let's kind of do the whole narrative from the beginning, because I think it's important that we keep the time scale and we set expectations. We're going to be dealing with this agenda item, and neighbors who are up there and stakeholders will read our minutes and say, well, did they give any indication of a path to completion?
So they did. So I guess I think 2 years back in 2010, when they purchased it, and then after the expiration, I think it was in 2012, they came to us and they had a plan. I think if I have that not in this file with me, but it's downstairs. I think they were looking at like 2019, 2020 for completion.
I'd just like to get that all on the record for when we're dealing with this, because
I'll provide that at our next
as you
meeting.
mentioned, it's a giant subdivision. It's 160 lots, which is
It's a big-
probably
Is
It goes right off.
How many
well
lots?
over half. I would say half has been built.
it's been,
But I would say that it gives you a good idea of kind of where the market's at over the last 10, 20 years. And you have to also recognize that these homes are going for, over $500,000.
So what is
I
the
mean,
intention of our regulations having a 10-year limit on subdivisions before they get terminated?
The statute dictates
Right.
that. And statutes, we had the 10-year thing. And the state legislature changed the statute to grant statutory extensions to certain projects when they were approved back between certain timeframes in 2008. I believe we applied the extension to this. application, and I'd have to go back and there was a rationale, and I want to say either we had granted an extension, and it had an active or an active development that met the statute, and therefore we extended it out to the 14 years. But I can give you all that data and all that background.
Yes, because are we due for
Next
another
week.
extension?
No, we can't grip it. That's it.
So when is that time horizon?
The time horizon, as I said, the subdivision has expired. The commission has not terminated. If someone on this commission said, I make a motion to terminate it, and you did, I'd be writing on the bylars tomorrow, expired. And I would have the carriers in my office saying, what? So, I think
What is your recommendation? We extend?
well, no, my recommendation is to let this continue forward. They've obviously shown the wherewithal to complete the public
Right.
improvements. They took a job that couldn't be completed and completed it, so,
Well, it's not completed.
not almost, but they've
They took a job that couldn't be completed. And
Well, is this based also on sales of lots?
right at the rate that they're selling them,
Right. Okay.
In either case, I mean, we got a significant portion of road that's been completed. The town can take it over. It's in a condition that we're ready to
Right.
do that. I think the key is really looking at, do you want the rest of the subdivision? I mean, the commission back in the 90s obviously wanted, it had no issue with, maybe they didn't want it, but they approved a plan for 160 lots. So in terms of the long-term plan of town, the 160 lots are accounted for.
so hypothetically, if it was a different subdivision and they had done 1,000 lots, right? If they were very ambitious, they said the market's very good. We're going to do
phase
1,000
this.
lots, and they had sold. They sold.
At some, I mean, I think you would say, okay, there's a point at which you're never going to complete this. And at least we have a time horizon, which we can see there's a light at the end of the tunnel, 2020. But if you were looking at, say, 2030, 2040 before it was completed, I would then say you may want to rethink whether or not you grant an extension or allow them to keep going. I mean, again, they're operating at their own risk. We hold their bond money.
Well, they effectively have
They
a
have-
tremendous. They have about 80 building lots in East Lyme right now that they're just sitting on.
Right, and in the lots that they're sitting on, the houses that they're building, they also have a challenge of selling those homes.
Yep.
And any attorney worth their salt is going to find in a title search that, hey, the expiration date we're beyond that. Are you sure you want to buy this lot? I would hope my attorney tells me that, because it's
That's
kind
the
of,
present condition.
that's the present condition.
And what kind of concerns would your attorney be indicating if they said you should know
The
it's
road is not
expired?
complete. If I buy a lot on Partridge Court, it's only got the binder course down. The town, and if I bought a lot, I just have to know if I'm borrowing money. I think the issue is going to be with the banks.
Well, we can.
Because
This
they're-
is good food for thought, and so I want to keep this on our agenda. Obviously, we're not going to make an action tonight, but when we review it at our next meeting, if we can kind of trace the whole narrative, and I think it'll be helpful for the commission members to just go through how these bonds and things go, and then make sure that we make the right decision about their present request to reduce the bond that we're holding.
Would this be the number one thing on our agenda?
It would be
Or would it be public hearing?
no, this wouldn't go to a public hearing. This would be just an administrative
It's a good question.
item, unless they reapplied. Now, if but I don't see them reapplying.
Is it kosher for them to be asking for this, reduction? I mean, is it,
Yeah, that's standard
okay,
par, I guess, for the course, if you will. It's developers routinely come in and request for bond reductions.
trying to save money?
Usually, yeah, basically to free it up.
Yeah.
If work gets completed, we typically don't have an issue releasing the money back to the developer.
Like you said.
So long as we retain enough to ensure that we have enough to protect our own
Cover.
liabilities and interests.
Yep.
So in a
and people-
perfect world where we would have a running monitor of how much road has been built and the balance of road unbuilt. And the idea of these bond reductions is to keep the amount of money consistent with and reflecting how much of it has been completion.
Right. But I would say one of the reasons we've let the carriers go on with the development as they have is because they have put up so much money. And the majority of it is in cash. So they want the cash back.
And if the,
But, I would also say, though, to Don's comment, if the commission were so inclined or wasn't comfortable, let's say, with a report from Victor, or Victor made a recommendation to say, don't release, only release this much and not that, you can do that. You can change the amount that gets released.
naturally, right. So if we find that it would,
Some-
again, we are advocating for the resident and the municipality. We want to make sure that there's enough, that the town is holding, that if something goes sideways or something goes wrong, we are funded when we make the commitment to complete the public improvements of the subdivision.
I have one question
Yeah.
related to that directly. So who's responsible for the work that was done for the remediation? That's my question. How much would it cost if something happened to that? Is the town going to be responsible to fix it?
Good question.
And do we know?
The homeowners association is going to be responsible for that slope. They own that land. They're getting that land. We're not taking it. We are not responsible. The town will not be responsible for contaminated material.
Okay.
So the homeowners association there will have.
Because that sounds expensive when you talk about remediation
It-
and like.
Yeah, they had
managing
to
that.
test the soils after, they had to strip the topsoils, test the soil, ensure that the soil that was there, bring in topsoil, because they removed all the stuff that had the pesticide in it. So. yeah.
Are they well, or is that is that water?
It's on city water and sewer.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I think that was probably part of the problem with the subdivision to begin with, is that the developer had to pay to run the sewer out there, and he went upside down after paying for that.
Yeah,
It just didn't pay, put that infrastructure
a lot of
in.
rock.
Contamination too.
I think it's a sewer, I think.
Could they have chose to dispose of the soil, of the contaminated soil, instead of building a mound on site? Could they have?
You'd have to ship it, and then you're paying for shipping.
Oh,
If
there's
they
that.
do incinerator, there's only a couple of those in the state.
Yeah.
That will take the material, and it costs a fortune to burn it, and you don't get much energy out of it, so it's an expense. So
Is
the
it noticed that you have that the parcel in question shouldn't be,
Well, those parcels will never be able to be used as building lots. They gave up 4 lots
right?
for.
I'm just thinking about neighborhood kids playing, stuff like that.
It's capped with 4 inches of
It's gonna,
topsoil.
buried.
The pesticide, the concern is bound to the soil, so it's not gonna, if I pick it up, it's not like mercury where it's gonna leach into my hand. It's bound to the soil, it's not moving anywhere. So I've been told.
Right, and what specific regulation do you run into if you have that present in the building? It's not a municipal regulation, is it?
Right, it's not in our
health
subdivision,
district?
it's the health code.
It's a public health code at the state level.
Basically, the health department is requiring, or the remediation of the lots, saying it's above a public health code standard for livability, for residential use, if you will.
Very well. Okay, so I won't take a
Question-
motion to.
question, Brian?
Yes.
Gary, could you send me or us a map? Email me a map so I can run up there and look. I don't know where this place is.
Oh, okay.
If possible, Mr. Gabriel, I think the applicant submitted a colored plan to our record
Yeah,
of their anticipated completion.
right, it was colored.
Yes.
Phases.
If we could dig that up,
Yes.
I would really, and I'd like to
I will-
make sure that we're consistent with that,
Yep.
and then,
So I'll dig that up. I think probably a good plan to send you, at least it gives you an overview of the whole
I
subdivision.
mean, I'd just rather have that before our next meeting,
Um,
if that's possible. Or does that constitute a meeting?
No, if I send it, I mean, as long as you don't respond to my email,
Right, okay.
I'll put that, do not respond, and I'll just send it to you. And Jen, yeah, we got Jen doing that, and I think we're doing pretty well with that so far, right, last few months.
I love Jennifer. Do not respond!
very well. Seeing as I think we're in agreement, we're not gonna take a motion on the Orchard's bond reduction, we'll just table it until our next meeting. Gary, just to be clear, should I take a motion there to table it, or should we just
No, it's just a table.
continue?
You just continue it to the next meeting.
We're continuing
Just like anything else, it's
to the
table.
next meeting.
Yeah, you don't have to motion that.
So I have time for one more motion.
I make a motion, the meeting of September 5th, 2017 is closed.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
500, we're done. Thank you. And Fran, I meant to introduce you to the commission. Thank you so much for taking our minutes.
Fred.
It's not a record.
So,